When you think of an ant-themed superhero teaming up with a daredevil, you'd most likely think of this, not whatever this is. Meet the comic series simply known as Ant. Ant is what you get when you take Spider-Man and turn him into the most female version of him whose only purpose is to activate neurons in some teenagers into buying the series, and believe it or not, it had a very successful run in the early 2000s. The series belongs to Image Comics, the company that was responsible for creating iconic characters such as Spawn and Invincible, both of whom will appear in the series as a cameo, but more on that later. The original writer for the series was Mr. Mario Gully, who is an interesting person to say the least. And outside of his personal life, he's basically an artist who refuses to draw anything but fanservice superheroes, and even came up with the idea of this comic series while he was incarcerated for robbery. Let me put it this way, dude was in jail for a whole year, no access to women, no access to internet, all he had to go on was a couple of posters and his imagination, so no wonder why the series turned out the way it did. The first couple of issues of the series was published by Arcana or Arcana Comics until it got moved to Image Comics because those guys actually saw the potential, and frankly, the series was right up their alley. What do I mean by that? Well, back in the early 2000s, the trend of bad girl comics where a flirtatious female protagonist with a morally great background who had no problem killing folks was at an all-time high. It was a completely different approach to the good girl era of comics, where most female characters would act like the damsel in distress, and fans seemed to love it. So a lot of companies who wanted to make a name for themselves kinda hopped on that trend, and even well-known ones, such as Marvel or DC, tried to give the spotlight to those characters who had the same stereotypes, such as Catwoman or Elektra. But the Ant comic series, with its excellently unique drawing and the push of putting fan-favorite characters such as Spawn in the series, quickly got ahead of the competition and was able to have a fairly decent and respectable run until people actually got bored of the trend and moved on. Outside of the fanservice-y stuff, the series had no story direction whatsoever. One panel had Superman in it without saying it's Superman because, you know, copyright laws. The other had 9/11 as a plot point. And the other explained how the main protagonist is a 14-year-old while simultaneously being an adult, which makes these suggestive drawings of her kinda weird and creepy. But the good thing is, back then, an edgy story with body parts flying everywhere would have been enough to hook the viewers, and this series had more than enough of that. But again, as I said, it got to a point where viewers lost interest in the series, partly because of its late releases, and partly because it didn't have much to go on aside from the fanservice-y stuff and unnecessary edge. And unfortunately for Mario Gully, that kinda was the mark of the beginning to an end. He kinda fell in with a bad crowd which faltered the sales at Image Comics, and before he knew it, things got so bad that he actually went broke and had to live in a hotel with his kids for a while. He basically got forced into selling the Ant series to his friend Erick Larsen, another well-respected artist who works for Image Comics, to get himself out of the financial debt he was in. That was also when he started looking for work from different companies, since apparently Image wasn't interested in working with him anymore. Long story short, he went to Marvel and got dumped by them, kickstarted a sketchbook he never finished, and rumor has it, his commission most of the time never saw the light of day, even though he actually took the money to finish the job beforehand. But just when it felt like all hope was lost for Gully, he got a message from Eric, the guy who he sold the rights to Ant, that basically asked him to come back as the co-creator of the now rebooted series. For you, me, or anyone else, it would have been the perfect opportunity to come back to the series we once created and rekindle that lost career of ours. But not for Mr. Gully. He exploded, and I do mean exploded, when he found out he couldn't put his ideas in Eric's story and took it to social media to basically blast the guy for it. Eric was all about making it a generic superhero comic, and Gully was like, nope, that Ant must have a BBL. That is not a sentence I thought I'd ever say. Don't get me wrong though, Eric wasn't an amateur when it came to putting extra spicy content in his stories, and I would even go as far as to say that his Savage Dragon series, the story he was working on before moving on to Ant, was far more explicit than anything Mario Gully's ever put out. And even though they had a falling out, his adaptation of the reboot kept it pretty faithful to the source material. He even tried to tie in the loose plot points and explain the things that didn't make any sense. He brought back Spawn to the story and had her have an Avengers team up with a dynamic Daredevil. You know, the guy who Marvel's Daredevil is actually based on. And to his credit, the story reached a somewhat of a satisfying end after 14 years of hiatus, but no matter what Erick Larsen tried to do with it, the story just couldn't hit the same. In my personal opinion, the reason as to why Erick Larsen's Ant failed had nothing to do with the content of the series, but more so the fact that people are rarely interested in buying or reading comics nowadays. It's just a fact, times have changed. I mean, even big companies such as Marvel or DC have to pull out insane collaborations, never seen before ideas, and straight up miracles in order for their sales to go up, and even then, a lot of people rather just wait for their favorite YouTubers to talk about that comic series and enjoy eating a snack while listening to them. Writing a compelling comic series can only get you so far. Like, who knew the boys' comic books before the TV series started making a name for itself? And I know other stories with the same premise as the boys who people never really talk about. Same thing with Dispatch. I mean, imagine instead of a game, it was a comic series made by a bunch of up-and-coming writers. Long story short, animation, movies, or video game adaptations, those are the things that people really care for nowadays. And that's mostly the reason as to why talentless writers such as Adi Shankar want to take forgotten IPs and bring them to life by making an animation series about them and taking credit for what the real writers did all those years ago.
Right, so and I didn't know that there was a Devil May Cry 5 coming out.
You didn't know?
No.
Wow.
I got actually unhappy when they so I signed the deal and I'm like, yeah, great, I'm doing it. And then they're like, good news, we have Devil May Cry 5 coming out.
Were you hoping to play it before doing your adaptation? Is that what you're saying? Or you just...
No, I actually thought the franchise was dead.
Oh, I got you.
This was my thing. Like I liked Dino Crisis. I
see.
And I thought I was bringing this thing back, and I'm like, oh, this is like a modern fucking thing. Like this is ongoing. Then I should have done Street Fighter.
And I kind of want to go back to Invincible and Spawn because the creator of both of those characters understood the assignment, and that is, again, writing a compelling comic can only get you so far. McFarlane tried his hands on both making an animation adaptation and a live-action version of Spawn, and even then, a lot of the younger generation got to know Spawn through his cameo in Mortal Kombat. And what Robert Kirkman did with his IPs don't need no introduction. To be fair, Eric did have somewhat of a good idea with his Savage Dragon series when he tried to parody Marvel and DC superheroes, but neither him or Gully grasped the fact that the best way to promote their series is by somehow putting their character as a cameo in either Spawn or Invincible. And I'm not talking about their comic series, I'm talking about the TV shows. But then again, we can't really expect too much from a series that had nothing but fan service going for it. And as for the creator of the series, Mr. Gully, he pretty much went silent after apologizing to Eric for what happened, and to my knowledge is still taking commissions. And if I'm being honest, comparing his art style to Eric is like comparing night and day, like he was smashing it back in the day. He was also very adamant on being the next Stan Lee, since his story on how he came up with the Ant series is literally how Stan Lee used to describe his first pitch about Spider-Man.
And I thought, gee, wouldn't it be something if we had a hero who could crawl on walls like a fly? So I said, yeah, that's great. Now, then I need a name. So I thought, Fly Man? That didn't sound dramatic enough. Insect Man? No. And I went down a list, and then I got to Spider-Man. And somehow, Spider-Man.
But unfortunately, it didn't really work out well for him. With that being said, I have to say I personally love to see a lot of these characters come back to life, especially after the whole superhero fatigue trend, where people now think that those stories are becoming repetitive when there's a lot of stories out there that haven't even been touched yet. The Ant series aside, the truth is we're used to seeing just one type of superhero stories, whereas the innovative types are really taking a back seat here. But as always, I'm curious to know what you guys think of the Ant series. Would you like me to talk about similar stories in the future? Also, this is my first long format video, and I'd really love to know if this is the type of videos you'd like me to make. So please let me know in the comments below, like and subscribe to all the good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.